Now, before I begin, just a heads up, the graphics in Hotline Miami might appear to be bright and basic looking, but the game does contain some pretty intense violence, so you have been warned. Hotline Miami is a top-down 2D shooter brawler with a strong emphasis on ultra-violence that all takes place in an 80s setting that's dripping equally in neon lights and blood. At first glance, you might think this game is just like every other retro indie title this year, and you wouldn't be too far off. It certainly ticks all the right boxes. It's got a unique pixel art style, a pulsating electro soundtrack, and a gameplay mechanic that appears simple at first, but reveals itself to be far more complex as you play on. However, what sets Hotline Miami apart is the unashamedly brutal way the game grabs you by the neck and drags you through the 20 short levels, throwing you clear out the other end with your hands shaking, heart pulsing, and your head full of questions. The storyline itself is not overly complex, at least not in terms of content. You play as a silent protagonist who, after an abrupt but informative tutorial on how to murder people, finds himself barraged with questions by a mysterious trio of masked men, before then flashing back in time to the events that led you to this disturbing situation. These events are all prompted by cryptic messages left on your answering machine, and they'll send you out to a variety of 80s locales where your only task is to brutally bludgeon your way through floors of armed gang members and patrolling guards. It all seems rather straightforward to begin with, but as you delve deeper into this seedy underworld, strange cracks begin to appear in the story, resulting in a far more thought out plot than first presumed. Unfortunately, the majority of this story is held back until the later stages in the game, and like any good moody mystery, there's never any complete resolve. But I still found it far more engrossing than many other overwritten storylines. The most interesting thing about Hotline Miami, though, has to be the gameplay. The simple act of fighting your way through numerous patrolling henchmen is nothing we haven't seen before, but by adding the dire consequence of one-hit kills, both for your opponents and yourself, the game becomes all about quick, repetitive playthroughs, akin to something more like Super Meat Boy, but with more blood. If that's even possible. The alarmingly fast AI won't hesitate to punch, stab, or blast you away should they spot you. It's the fast and frenetic nature of these brutal killings that quickly becomes second nature. And while watching the first few deaths can be confronting, as it's the only way to progress, the game delights in forcing your hand to slaughter seemingly endless thugs and grunts. That's not to say the game is unenjoyable, quite the opposite. There's a wicked joy to be had as you dangerously dance in and out of rooms, funneling goons through kill corridors, and walking away at the end unharmed with a high score. The game even goes so far as to give you a grade based on how violent and bold your killing spree was. This system actively encourages you to throw caution to the wind and charge into each stage swinging wildly, relying more on killer instinct than calculated planning. So while Hotline Miami may appear on the surface to be no more than a regular run and gunner, there were a handful of unforgettable moments in the game that made me think there was a lot more going on here than just an arcade-style slaughterhouse. For instance, at the end of each stage, after you've executed every living thing in the level, the music suddenly cuts to a dull drone, and you're forced to walk back to your car, through each room, and past the piles of corpses that have built up during your murderous rampage. It's not only confronting, but it allows you a brief window of time to ponder on your character's motivations and why exactly he keeps answering these calls. Driving away from the scene, your character then performs some small menial task like hiring a VHS from the friendly shopkeeper. These moments attempt to humanize the character and settings, creating some really interesting mixed emotions for you, the player. Even the aforementioned scoring system feels like it's there to make you feel slightly guilty for the acts you've just committed, while at the same time taunting you to return and beat it. The game has an amazing soundtrack that includes plenty of vibrant, pounding tracks that perfectly suit the era of the game. It all feels like something straight from a piece of 80s revenge cinema, and I have to say it's incredibly refreshing to see and enjoyable to play. If you do decide to give it a go, you should go in with your eyes open because it's a masterful piece of game design that's dripping with substance and oozing with style, and I got a lot more out of this than I was expecting. So it's an 8.5 from me.